Hello, Comet and Pierce. I had already reported in a few videos about my intention to focus more on the Pacific region. It started in 2023, near Christmas, when my son expanded his inventory of miniatures to include Japanese and Americans for bolt action. At the same time, I was thinking about starting with Blood Red Skies and Victory at Sea, together with a friend. I already owned Combined Arms back then, and this seemed like a perfect moment to put all these games together. All four Warlord games combined in a single campaign. But then GW's Old World came out, and the priorities of my companion went into a different direction. My son discovered 6mm and 3mm figures and left first the scale and then the time period, venturing into World War I and modern war. I too effectively gave up on the era and went back to pike and shot, along with other activities that originated back then. Two things changed the situation again. First, Battlefront announced a return to the Pacific. A relatively easy way to get figures in 15mm scale. Brexit is still hitting us hard on the European mainland, and this has not been a good for the hobby, in my opinion. A second thing that caught my attention was the announcement of Pacific Command by Osprey Books. It was published in mid-May 2025 and was a positive surprise. Until now, I had only wanted to fight for a fictional island, perhaps with a historical reference. But now, strategic movement in the Pacific Ocean became a manageable effort. A first test game worked more than well and showed what was possible with Pacific Command. Nevertheless, as I always do, I immediately looked for alternative rules. I found them in Honor Games Nimitz, or better the included game Helsley. Maritime operations are also depicted here, including landing of troops and airstrikes. At this time, I also picked up Battlegroup Pacific War to have a 15mm rules alternative. Next to Flames of War, I thought about starting with I Ain't Been Shot Mum. The game is quite suitable for smaller dynamic battles in a hostile environment. There are also a few interesting scenario books for the time, but unfortunately they are not available on the continent. As you can see, rules and regulations determine my motivations quite a lot. And I wouldn't shy away from switching to the system that suits me best in a campaign. Since several channels are currently dealing with the topic of the Pacific, I have also looked at other potential alternatives for ground combat from afar. Rapid Fire or O-Group immediately come to mind. I'm a little unsure when it comes to scale in some areas. Of course 15mm for the ground troops, unless my son lends me his 3mm or 28mm miniatures from time to time. But in the maritime sector it's more difficult. Victory at Sea, 1 to 1800 models are an option, but GAQ's 1 to 2400 models are smaller, cheaper, and easier to combine. The same problem prevails in the sky. Warlord's Blood Red Sky, or rather one of the hex-based games like Check Your Six or Back the Hun. These could then be played in 3mm scale, which allows for a larger contingent of planes. The luxury problems of planning. At the moment, I would like to trust in what is tangible. My son allows me to paint his ships, and my warlord planes will finally be painted too. A basic set of figures also could be secured, and I'm thinking about supplementing this with Peter Pig models. I had already had my eyes on other figures there. When it comes to terrain, I already gotten 2 battle maps to show the Pacific or landings. I'm less picky when it comes to terrain, as functionality is more important. My talent for terrain construction is also quite limited. Otherwise, I got some bigger bases for jungle terrain and a few plants from the aquarium range. I trust some tips from Wargames, Soldiers and Strategy. I haven't been able to decide on the trees yet. I would prefer native plants other than palms, but it looks like palms remain in the most viable solution. Other native trees are much harder to come by, and you will need a lot of trees. I'm a little tempted to also treat myself to a suitable board game as a basis for the campaign. Perhaps just for display or realistic logistic simulations. Pacific War or better Empire of the Sun would come into question. I have to admit that I like games like this, but I get to play them even less often than I do miniature war games, unfortunately. Finally, I should briefly mention the literacy side. So far, I've been able to familiarize myself with the fleets at the beginning of the war and the developments that led into the war. Aaron Jones, a viewer, has already recommended an interesting resource for the New Guinea campaign to me. If you know of other interesting titles, please write them in the comments. I currently still use a high proportion of Osprey books, but some points could use a little more depth in order to get to know other aspects. Advice is also welcome regarding rule systems, terrain construction, or usable miniatures. I will probably start with 1941 as my focus and work my way from there. I will skip Pearl Harbor as it would require too much effort, and large channels like Little Wars TV have already done a great job. But the most important thing will probably be painting, terrain or jungle construction, and keep painting. Till then, and take care.